This is just an example of I've participated in national groups. I think this was AARP or some group nationally that I was participating in. I'm not even quite sure what it was, but I'm quite sure it was a national group. I had to decide in my life. I come from Battle Creek. My father worked in the cereal factory, and my mother was a secretary. And I kind of looked at their careers when I was in high school, and I thought, I'm not going to be able to do that kind of work. I can't physically work in a factory. I'm not going to be, I will never type as fast as my mother typed or take shorthand. So I made a decision in late high school that I was going to have to use my mind and other skills. So that meant I was going to have to get an education if I was going to really have the life that I wanted to have, and use my strengths. My strengths were my mind and my determination and my insight, because I could see that this wasn't going to work for me. So I was the first person in my entire family who got degrees from college. But you have to kind of look at your environment, look at yourself, and decide what your strengths are and how you're going to use those strengths. This is just an example of a colleague of mine who was attending MSU and working a part-time job at Michigan State University, and had a building wall literally fall on him. And he was a science major, so he went on to have a lot of jobs that used his mind and used his incredible knowledge of technology and science. He was involved in many different projects throughout his life, and he did pass on in 2007. But this was him at his desk working at computers. He operated all our computers and database, and had contracts with other people for their technology work. He also and his wife adopted 2 children from China, who would have had a very bleak life without their adopting them from China. So he had a very full life and contributed a lot. Okay, so now we're going to shift to relationships. This is a picture of my husband and I right before our wedding. And I was going through some of my scrapbooks, you had scrapbooking class today, looking for pictures to use in this presentation, and I hadn't looked at this in a while, and I said, gee, we both look kind of like scared, like deer in headlights on this picture. And I said, well, that's part of it. So it's a picture of our, right before our wedding. I don't remember feeling that way, but we sure looked that way in this picture. But there's ways of developing many relationships, and the relationships are important to getting things in your life that you want to do and having, winning in this game of life. I would have never gotten invited to that trip to Lithuania if I didn't have good, positive relationships with the people on the rehab unit at University of Michigan Hospital. Not that we didn't clash sometimes, because we did. Because as you may know, independent living model versus medical model sometimes clashes. They don't always mesh together. But we always understood that we were coming from different perspectives. And so we had a lot of respect. So I got that invitation because of a relationship. And I also developed a long-term friendship with my friend in Lithuania. Yanina also came and stayed with me in Ann Arbor for a while. And she was, this is where I learned that we don't appreciate the choices we have. She was overwhelmed by the choices that she could see in this country. And she just said, that's too many. One of her goals was, when the Soviets were dominating their country, they closed all their churches, beautiful, gorgeous churches. They closed them all. And it's a strongly Roman Catholic country. So people literally had altars in their apartments. And when she came to visit me, she wanted it, she had learned English pretty well. She wanted a Bible in English. So I took her to, it's now closed, but Borders in Ann Arbor, which if you've ever been to Ann Arbor, Borders was a huge bookstore. And it literally had a wall of Bibles to choose from. And she finally did choose one, but it was really overwhelming. And I almost felt sorry I took her. I thought, oh, I should take her to a smaller bookstore. Because she had a hard time with that. And all the choices, but she was getting ideas constantly. She was looking at my kitchen and saw what I did to my kitchen in lowering counters. She was looking at the equipment I used and figuring out how she could do that and how she could get her friends to help her make some of those adaptations. Now, one of the things I learned that I didn't really appreciate is she loved cooked cabbage. And she wanted to cook it in my house all the time. And I woke up to the smell. She would, they didn't have traditional breakfast with like eggs and bacon and toast or bagels or whatever. I woke up to cooked cabbage smell. Like, oh.
Wow.
Yeah. I tolerated it because she was a guest, I was trying to be tolerant, but after like 3 or 4 days of it, I said, please don't cook cabbage in the morning anymore.
I'll take you to McDonald's.
Yeah. Yeah. So now we come to the fun part. A game of life is one big adventure, and it involves risks, and I advocate people taking reasonable risks. This is one I took. That was the ramp into the building we stayed at in Lithuania.
Oh.
It was a little bit sturdier than it looks, but I always, and so they always immediately did it. I didn't have to ask them. Had somebody walk up the side of that with me or down it, because as you can see, there's no railings, there's no lips on the side. If you go off, you go off. So that was, sometimes it is a risk. Now, that's what life is about. And, that was a little scary, but I would not trade that 2-week adventure for anything in the world. Now, another one that I did, though, that I learned from that I would not ever do again, it's just north of here, up near Keweenaw. There was a cruise, it might have been in Traverse City. There was a cruise being offered, and they didn't have an accessible ramp onto there. And there was big, strong guys who all said, oh, no problem, we can get you on the boat. And they went, and I said, okay, you look like strong guys. But they went to pick up my power chair and had no clue what my power chair weighed. And my chair immediately went like this. And if my friend had not been with me, pushing me back in the chair, I would have been right into the lake. Because it was right over the lake. So I would never do that and never let people lift my power chair ever again. But you learn those things from taking some risks. So I like to travel. So this next picture is actually a postcard. A picture of what's called the cliff dwellers in the Colorado National Park, well, the Mesa Verde Colorado National Park. It's the southern part. And again, I get a lot of trips by my work relationships. This one, I've been invited to speak about self-determination. Colorado was just putting self-determination in all of their supports and services waivers. So they had somebody to speak in Denver and Boulder, which is on the east side of the mountains. But they needed people they invited me to speak in 2 cities on what they call the West Bluff. That's in the big mountains. And I said, oh, that'd be fun. I've never been to there before. So I agreed to it, and then found out there's no van to rent except from Denver. So we had to get to Denver, rent a van, and then drive to these places. Down, it's all the winding things you see on TV with the mountains, with the hairpin turns, with no guardrails. And then I decided I was out there in Durango, which is in the southern part of southwest Colorado. And it was only like 70 or 80 miles from a friend of mine that lives in north of Santa Fe, New Mexico. And this was a tourist attraction on the way. So we had to drive, and we drove down those hairpin turns and had my heart in my mouth up beautiful, spectacular things. And this is actually, they called them cliff dwellers. They were apartments of Pueblo Indians, or Native Americans, and they literally had these built under cliffs, and they would use rope ladders to get down into them. So they were pretty much immune from attack. And they have one, and there's several of these communities among the cliffs. They had one that they had built an accessible sidewalk down to the main floor of those, so you could get an impression of being right in those apartments. And they were very modern looking apartments, but if you see the holes, there's like 5 holes in the front there. That's where they had ceremonies and their common areas of eating. And that's kind of a cutaway of some of those apartment buildings. Now, I had the experience, though, of the sidewalks were similar to the roads we did. They had hairpin turns, and you could go off the side of those going down to those buildings. And I said to my husband, I said, well, can you hang on to the back of my chair? And he said, yeah, I can do that if it'll make you feel better, but if your chair goes careening off the side of this, I'm not going to be able to stop it. But I did it anyway, and it was a great experience. It really was a great experience, and I obviously survived. But I took those curves pretty slowly. So it is a life is a big adventure. They said, and I'm of course interested in history, they said these Pueblo Indians lived in these cliff dwellers for several hundred years. And they had to move because the water, they had a really dry spell and the water ran out of those canyons there. But fascinating. So finally, you got to have fun. You must have fun. You must try to have fun in everything you do. Find a way to have fun. I enjoy boats and water. I love traveling. I love playing games. I do love playing games. Tiger baseball. I didn't bring a picture of that. It's mainly the Tiger baseball. I mean, I like seeing them win, and they do that sometimes. But going to the games is an experience in itself. It's got lights and lights. If you're easily overstimulated, I don't recommend it because it's got lights coming at you and messages coming at you from all directions. It's got food. It's got just the adventure, the competitiveness, and the energy of being in a stadium with 40,000 people. The other thing it has on the weekends is fireworks. I love fireworks. I can get that all in one by getting a baseball game tickets. It's kind of like being a kid and just having fun again. So we do that a couple times a year. And I just like this next picture with on one of the other trips to the Southwest I've taken. It's this is in Sedona, Arizona. And Sedona is, you can tell I'm kind of interested in Native American stuff. Sedona is a place that used to be a very spiritual gathering place for many Native American tribes. And it's a place of peace. They used to have big peace conferences there. And really beautiful country. It's got all dark red rocks, and it's just very beautiful. And this is me sitting above a little canyon, not a great big one, but looks bigger than it is. And that was just a really fun trip for me because I love the art. It's got very unique art. It's not this standard kind of things. It's unique, people-made art, and I really enjoyed that. And I like playing games. This is when my friend's son was very little, and he, of course, had won, so he's waving his money up and down, his fake money. And my friend's, he was having a great time. My friend's husband's in the background, and I know he was on the phone talking about volleyball, so he's a big volleyball sport. So this is just another example of having fun. So I just thought you'd enjoy the picture. So this is my summary that people in winning the game of life is you really have to look at life as always learning new things. A lot of people think that's why we're here, is to learn lessons, to learn things about life that we're supposed to learn. Making a difference, that can be to one person, to a community, to your nation, to your world. I have gotten involved in some of the worldwide, and disability rights movement is a worldwide movement. It has a lot of people. In fact, that phrase I told you, nothing about us without us, came from a person with disability in Africa. I don't know where in what country. It might have been South Africa, but it came from a disability rights activist in Africa. It's about having mutual support and the supports we need to win our game of life. And that can come from spouses, friends, work colleagues, whoever. And it's also about taking risks, making our choices, making mistakes. We really can't succeed. And a lot of people don't get this. A lot of people think, well, you want to go through life and make as few mistakes as possible. You won't learn if you don't make some mistakes. You won't succeed if you haven't learned from previous mistakes. That's a part. Making mistakes is a part of life. And my husband's son, my stepson, has some issues with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. So he thinks everything should be perfect and that everything should be free of making mistakes. He gets really angry at himself when he makes mistakes. And we constantly try to tell him, you need to make mistakes. That's what life is about. That's when you succeed. And then lastly, it's about enjoying yourself. Finding as much fun as you can